Good morning. It is Thursday, the 14th of May. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today. That's your daily digest of European news and context, live here on Euronews. Coming up, in the context of trade tensions with China and a war in the Middle East that has infuriated the Chinese, Donald Trump is in Beijing for tough talks with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. We'll bring you the European lens on these talks. They come as Lebanon and Israel hold fresh meetings in the US as their latest ceasefire nears end. Meanwhile, despite murmurs from the Russian president this week that the full-scale war in Ukraine might end soon, Russia has been launching mass daytime drone and missile strikes against Ukraine. This as President Zelensky wraps up talks with NATO in Romania. Plus, foreign ministers from the Strasbourg-based human rights body, the Council of Europe, are gathering in Moldova today to adopt a political declaration on human rights and migration. NGOs fear, though, a watering down of fundamental rights and press freedom. But first, all eyes on Beijing, where Donald Trump is spending 3 days on his first visit since 2017. The US president is holding direct talks, of course, with the Chinese president at a time when the world is in turmoil over trade tensions, ongoing wars and the growing power of big tech. We can start by taking a listen to what the two leaders had to say when they met.
中美两国能不能跨越
China and the United States can move beyond the so-called Thucydides trap and set a new example in bilateral relations between major powers. We can work together to address global challenges, injecting stability to the world, and we can improve the well-being of our peoples and the shared future of humanity, building a good future for our bilateral relations.
We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. On behalf of all of the great delegation that we have the greatest businessmen, the biggest, and I guess the best in the world. And they're here today to pay respects to you and to China.
And now for some analysis on this visit, I'm joined here in the studio by our US politics expert, that is Stefan Krobbe. Stefan, good morning.
Good morning, Maeve.
Tell us more about this trip. What exactly should we be looking out for?
Well, Maeve, they have started their talks already. We don't know the detailed agenda, but they're expected to discuss a whole range of thorny issues, the core of which is trade. And Trump himself, just before his departure, said that he'll be talking about trade with Xi Jinping more than anything else. Now, Trump is flanked by 17 CEOs of big American corporations, Elon Musk among them, and he's seeking to strike deals with China to have them buy more American products, from food to aircraft. Remember, the trade war with China that Trump started has sent the bilateral trade into freefall and forced companies from both sides of the Pacific to regroup. Now, the Chinese side wants a more balanced economic relationship, a more stable relationship, and they seem to have the better cards. They are sitting on most of the world's rare earth reserves that are used for basically every tech product that has a battery. They control the critical supply lines, and they have invested heavily in green tech, in green energy. And that makes them suffer much less than other countries from the current energy crunch and the recent spike in oil prices due to the war in Iran. And this is where Trump's problems start. The Iran war that he triggered more than 2 months ago has led to global energy crunch, sky-high oil prices and gas prices, and plummeting approval ratings at home. So he doesn't seem to have a strategy to end the war in Iran, and now he wants the Chinese to help him find a diplomatic solution. But so far, Beijing has shown very little interest to wade into this conflict that they consider entirely to Washington's making. Instead, Xi prefers to let the US embroil itself in another Middle East war. So getting the Chinese to do something about Iran, that is probably Trump's biggest challenge here.
OK, and meanwhile, of course, today in Brussels, the EU institutions are closed for the bank holiday, but they are keeping a close eye very nervously, Stefan.
Yes, indeed, Maeve. They are watching the summit from the right? That's because there's not much else they can do. And they are quite nervous because really they can't be optimistic about any outcome, as they risk being squeezed between superpowers, two superpowers who don't care much about European interests. If Trump and Xi struck a tactical deal over what we call managed trade that would give the US preferential access to rare earths, for example, that would leave Europe with shortages and trade restrictions that put a lot of pressure on European companies. That is about the nightmare scenario for the European Union. On the other hand, if US-China trade relations further escalated and became a trade war, that could hit European industries through weaker demand, globally disrupt supply chain and financial volatility. So it's almost a lose-lose situation for the Europeans, mate.
OK, Stefan Kobe, thank you so much for that analysis. And as you heard there, an interesting takeaway from this visit is the fact that some of the most richest and most powerful tech companies in the world are also present. Our Jakob Yanis has the lowdown.
Hey, how's your first day? Because Donald Trump has just landed in Beijing for a summit that feels less like diplomacy and more like a Silicon Valley board meeting. He hasn't just brought officials, and one could say he has arrived with an AI cabinet to navigate high-stakes tech Cold War. Alright, so who's on the guest list, and should Europe be worried? First, Elon Musk is there to protect Tesla's massive Chinese footprint, and also his interest as head of XAI. And he's accompanied by Tim Cook, who is managing his final lap as Apple's CEO, balancing billions in sales with a shift of production away from China. And there is also the king of chips, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, who joined at the last minute to lobby for the sale of powerful H200 AI chips, which are currently stalled by US and Chinese regulations. And joining them are the giants of the supply chain. Micron is there to fight Beijing's ban on American memory chips, while Qualcomm aims to protect its role as the primary chip supplier for China's biggest smartphone brands. And they are not just talking trade. They are discussing the new age of AI-supported warfare and the risk of China copying American frontier models. So if you ever wondered what the AI industry looks like in practice, these CEOs provide the perfect picture. And that picture also highlights where Europe stands in the AI race. So if you're looking for a European OpenAI or Google, the news is grim. The continent lacks hyperscale giants. But hey, the news isn't all bad, as Europe is securing its own AI supply chain. And while superpowers fight over AI models, European firms like STMicroelectronics, Soitec and ASML provide the essential hardware to build them. And this bet is on strategic autonomy. The idea that you don't need to outspend the superpowers if you control the tools that drive the race. But will it be enough? Well, you can always ask this question to your favorite AI agent. Just remember, the answer might vary depending on whether you ask Elon Musk's Grok or Francis Mistral.
That was Jakob Yanis, of course, reporting for us there. And now to take a closer look at what's at stake for the EU, we can bring in Michael Bloss, a German MEP from the Green Party. An MEP who's working very closely on EU-China relations. We're thrilled to have you with us. Good morning. And of course, we're hearing, Donald Trump saying we're the two superpowers, referring to the US and China. So where does that leave the European Union? Sandwich somewhere in the middle.
That's true. It is a moment where Europe has to realize that it is not sitting at a table when the two superpowers speak about very important things that is also determining Europe's fate. So they're shaking hands over the heads of European leaders, and we have to understand that only when Europe speaks with one voice, when we are better coordinating in our China policy, but also in our US policy, we can have an influence.
Well, that is the issue. You said Europeans are not around the table, and everyone says if you're not on the table, you're clearly on the menu. How can the EU and the 27 countries survive in this world where Washington and Beijing are cutting deals over Europe's head and neither obviously caring about the climate, the environment or privacy issues?
Well, it seems that we have to realize that it's difficult to survive if we're not speaking with one voice. But it's really, Europe is squeezed, as it was said already. There is a trade war with the US happening, but also if we look at our trade relations with China, this has really turned around now. There is a trade deficit of 360 billion euros. So the question is for us, how do we get more autonomy and more sovereignty? And I think the answer is, as I said already, speaking with one voice is very difficult, especially looking at the member states, and China is doing this divide and conquer policy. But it also means, for instance, with regards to energy imports, energy policy becoming sovereign by producing our own energy. And second, I think also rare earths. Europe is absolutely dependent for all its technology on rare earths. And also here we have to diversify and not being so dependent on China.
And of course, Donald Trump is a very transactional president. How could deals being struck this week in Beijing impact negatively European industry?
Yeah, it was already said. When there is better relationships between the US and China, that can result in less market access, for instance, from the EU to the Chinese market. However, I think I want to also discuss on another policy area, which is security. I think that's also very important, and it's interesting, or there is a risk that the US is less focused on Taiwan, and we see that the main security risk for Europe currently is Russia's attack on Ukraine. We heard that tonight and yesterday there was this massive drone attack, and China is supporting Russia in this. If China would pull the plug on the war of Russia against Ukraine, that would really help us. But it seems that they are more entering into some kind of imperialist policies, and that's really also a problem for Europe.
OK, Michael Plus, thank you so much for waking up early on this Thursday bank holiday, for joining us here live on Europe Today. Now moving on to Bucharest, where NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte joined talks with the so-called B9 countries, mostly from the east. The idea was to beef up defence technologies. It comes as the US announced that 5,000 troops, could be withdrawn from Germany over European countries' refusal to join the war in Iran. Our NATO correspondent, Shona Murray, has the scoop and joins me now here on set. Good morning, Shona. Just first, tell us about these meetings.
Well, the B9 meeting was in Bucharest, which is the Central European countries like Romania, Hungary, the Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia and so on. And they were also joined by the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, Finland and so on. Also President Zelensky was there, and Mark Rutte, Secretary-General of NATO. So it was an important meeting to discuss European security and joint drone production. But Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General, was also asked about this rift with Donald Trump that's ongoing with NATO. He said NATO allies have gotten the message over Iran, but not quite true, because if you look at Trump's message yesterday to reporters, he said that NATO was very disappointing to me. NATO was not there when we wanted them. We don't need NATO, but if we need them, they just weren't there. So you can see that's ongoing. But lots of sources I've spoken to said that really Donald Trump is trying to distract from what is not a very successful war in Iran.
And meanwhile, of course, Shona, you have some exclusive information about these plans of the US to withdraw troops from Germany. Tell us more.
So this is really interesting, Maeve, because as we know, the US announced 5,000 troops will be withdrawn from NATO territory in Germany. What I heard over the last few hours and late last night, it was confirmed to be by a NATO person, was that instead of removing the 5,000, a 4,000 troop brigade that was due to be sent from the United States to Poland has been cancelled. So in effect, there's no net problem when it comes to NATO's troop force within Europe. Now, take a listen to Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO, when he was asked about this yesterday.
When you look at the US presence in Europe, it is still vast and massive. And there is a clear commitment by the United States to stay involved. We know that we are investing now more in Europe. We have always known that the United States, over time, has to pivot more towards Asia. So We are all in this all together. Obviously, it is a sovereign decision of the United States where they will bring their troops, how they will do that, but we do this in close consultation.
Now, that's Mark Rutte, and he's not necessarily answering the question. And this is interesting because in Poland over the past few weeks, after that announcement, Polish media was speculating that these troops could go from Germany to Poland. In fact, the opposite is the case. A whole 4,000 troop, it's a replenishment troop or brigade, will now not be sent to Poland, which will obviously be very difficult for them. But essentially, there is no net effect to NATO's troop force with US troop forces within NATO. And I did get a confirmation on this from a NATO military official who said NATO rotational forces do not factor into NATO's deterrence and defence plan. So it looks like this issue has been somewhat resolved for the betterment of everybody, including US-NATO relations.
OK, Shona Murray, our NATO correspondent, thank you so much for that very comprehensive analysis. But now to another story that's making the rounds here in Brussels. The EU has stopped short of heeding a petition by over 1 million Europeans about banning unscientific conversion therapy, designed, of course, to change people's identity and sexual orientation. The UN, is calling for a worldwide ban. Our EU correspondent, Angela Scugins, spoke exclusively to the EU Commissioner for Equality, Hadja Labib.
Yeah, it's a torture and it's a physical and psychological harassment that could lead to a deep depression or suicide. And that's why we need really to react and to combat these practices. And these young citizens who gather 1 million signatures succeed to create awareness. We've launched a study and we are going to organize, to put into place a forum for discussion between member states, between the Commission. Already 8 member states took the decision in their legislative national legislation to ban these practices, but we need to see all of them, and we are going to encourage them and to show the path. And by taking this recommendation, we take a very strong stance. We need to see these practices banned in our union.
But you just highlighted that 8 member states have banned this. How are you going to convince the other dozens that haven't done this so far? What pressure are you going to put on them?
By exchanging best practices. So we will show, first of all, that it is possible to ban, no matter what is your political architecture. I mean, Germany has taken this bold step, Belgium, Spain, many countries, and 3 countries at least are monitoring, are willing to take this kind of decision. And I think we need to create more awareness because, frankly speaking, I met many ministers and a lot of them are not aware of what are these practices about.
What happens if a member state does not accept this recommendation? What follows from the side of the Commission?
It's non-binding. This is the path that we choose because we didn't want to take, decades of discussions like we are doing with the Equal Treatment Directive. So we prefer to build on the goodwill, on awareness, and on the fact that if we still believe that our union is a union of freedom, of expression, of equality, we need to ban these practices.
Angela Scugins there speaking to the Belgian EU Commissioner Hadja Labib. And in case you missed it, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy, he's back in the news again as French prosecutors are seeking a 7-year prison sentence for him for allegedly accepting illegal campaign contributions from the late Libyan dictator. A verdict is expected on November 30th. You can read more about that story and any other stories we're covering for you here on Euronews.com. And of course, you can drop us a line, EuropeToday@Euronews.com, and you can tell us what kind of stories you'd like us to cover, from football to film festivals or the ban on Brazilian meat. We'd love to hear your preferences. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in to Europe Today. Take care and see you soon here on Euronews. is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis.
The most historic EU leaders meeting of all time.
Is the European Union still relevant on the world stage?